Hello, everybody, and welcome to the CXDay 2019 Fresh Thinking Panel, Metrics, Measurement, and ROI, One Size Doesn't Fit All, Determining the Right CX Success Metric for Your Organization. We are so excited that you're spending your CX Day with the Customer Experience Professionals Association. And my name is Derek Iverson, and I am a Membership Community Manager with the CXPA. You can find me at derek@cxpa.org if you have any questions on what it's like to be a CXPA member. I'm your guy. And for you CCXPs who are watching, you are eligible to submit 0.5 CEUs just for viewing today's webinar. Today's panel is going to be moderated by Gabe Smith, CCXP, who serves as CXPA's content manager, where he creates and curates relevant, timely, and useful content that increases engagement in the CXPA and advances CX practice. Prior to joining CXPA, Gabe was a CX practitioner for several years with the American Cancer Society, where he led programs and projects aimed at improving CX for ACS signature fundraising events, as well as patient service programs across the United States. And with that, I'll turn it over to Gabe.
Thank you so much, Derek, and happy CX Day to you and to all of our panelists. I'm so glad to be joined by all of you today, and I'd like to just do some brief introductions, and then we'll dive right into this really important topic. So joining us today is Bob Azman, CCXP and CXPA Board Chair. Bob brings 35 years of business and service operation leadership to this panel, as well as a sought-after expertise in improving the customer experience. Most recently, Bob served as Vice President, Traveler Services Americas at Carlson Wagonlit Travel. Bob has also held executive positions at Thomson Reuters, Ceridian, and Deluxe Corporation. He managed global customer service and technical support organizations, as well as software implementation and training and development functions worldwide. He is an adjunct professor in the University of Minnesota Carlson School of Management's Supply Chain and Operations Management Department, and is a frequent industry conference speaker on the subject of developing effective customer experience and service strategies. We're also joined by Greg Tucker, CCXP. Greg is an inspirational leader and speaker with broad and deep experience in customer experience and digital transformation. As a senior executive at AAA, Clorox, and Copart Auto Auctions, he led customer experience transformations that delivered strong increases in customer loyalty results, as well as over 100 million of profit contributions. As a leading CX management consultant and advisor, he's worked with dozens of global leaders such as Microsoft, Oracle, AT&T, SAP, GE, DocuSign, Thomson Reuters, Forescout Technologies, Genentech, and Wells Fargo. These efforts have been recognized with the 2012 CXPA Innovation Award, a 2016 CX Expert, and an HBR article that profiled his work and his leadership. Greg received his MBA from Stanford Graduate School of Business and is a certified CCXP, NPS Certified Associate, and Six Sigma Black Belt. And last but not least, we have Rachael Perez, CCXP. Rachael currently serves as the Senior Manager of Global Customer Experience at Illumina, where she builds world-class CX programs to ensure the best possible outcomes for Illumina's customers and patients. Rachael's passion for CX is simply unparalleled. A great evangelist for promoting the importance of voice of the customer, Rachael works tirelessly to capture customer data and use it to uncover critical insights on how to improve business interactions with customers through the entire customer lifecycle. She approaches business problems with optimism, an open mind, and a positive attitude. As her colleagues can attest to, Rachael is always the pleasure to work with and is a joy to have on the team. Well, I can certainly say to the panelists that it's a pleasure and a joy to have you all here today. So let's go ahead and dive right into today's topic, metrics, measurement, and ROI. We know that there are a variety of CX top-line metrics. You have Net Promoter Score, you have Customer Effort Score, you have Customer Satisfaction or CSAT. Could you just give an overview of these metrics? Possibly there are others you want to talk about, and your view of some of their strengths and weaknesses. So Bob, let's go ahead and kick things off with you here.
Thanks, Gabe. Great to be here, joined by my colleagues. I'll just say a few words so that everybody can kind of chime in on these three. Net Promoter Score, perhaps the most popular or most frequently mentioned experience measurement, and derived from the question, are you willing to recommend a company's products or services, tied to a couple of other questions around overall satisfaction and willingness to continue using the products. And it's interesting you asked about customer effort score, because in some cases, companies are now asking the fourth question. I always call those first three the three big questions that we ask our customers, and sometimes they're asking the fourth, which is the customer effort score. How much effort did you put forth to work with us as a company? Are we easy to do business with? And so that's really the core of the customer effort score. And then, of course, there's satisfaction. Interesting you called it satisfaction, because there's an overall satisfaction score, but of course loyalty is also a component of that. So I'll just let my colleagues chime in with that as an introductory comment on those three measurements.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Bob, for that overview. Rachael, would you like to kind of expand on that? You know, that great overview from Bob on sort of those metrics. Any others that you want to discuss, and you know, what are your view of the strengths or weaknesses of some of those metrics?
Thanks, Gabe, and happy CX Day, everybody, and thanks to the colleagues here, and I'm happy to be a part of this panel. I really get excited about metrics because there's so much you can learn from them. But the problem, I think the biggest weakness of any metric is everybody thinks one answer is going to solve everything. And as Bob mentioned, there's really, you know, you've got the top three, right? For me, those are NPS, CES, and OSAT. Depending on my experience has been in high tech for the last 20 years. And so B2B, I also recommend, if you're a service provider, likely to recommend renewing, because that for me is the proof in the pudding as to whether or not they're going to continue to do business with you. But ultimately, it comes down to understanding what is your value proposition, what is your brand promise, and what is your desired customer experience. So whether we're talking about the company across the board, and we're going to use NPS there, and our, of course, overall SAT and customer effort score, we can tie those roughly to the loyalty pyramid, right? The bottom is meet my needs. That's kind of overall satisfaction. Are you delivering a product that meets their needs? The next step being the ease of use. So that kind of ties pretty close to the CES score. And then the delight me, make it a joy to be a part of this organization, make me a raving lunatic fan. Well, that's your NPS score. So there's a pretty solid trio, and not one of those really covers everything else. Working together, using these metrics together, you can get a pretty solid picture of just where your customer stands and your company's future. But again, it all depends on what you're trying to accomplish and what the brand promises and what you've told customers they can expect in way of experience, because you're going to want to tie your metrics to those company objectives.
Yeah, and a great point. You know, you mentioned not a one size fits all, really organizationally dependent. So Greg, I want to kick this over to you here. Any thoughts that you have on those metrics or any others and the relative strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah, you know, as an operator in using the different metrics, you know, I agree that one metric isn't all of them. It's kind of like asking, how's your health? It's like, well, my pulse is 62. Well, that's not a good indicator of your health. You need a variety of other metrics. If you're looking at brand health, you know, that's a question. You've got to have a lot of things. You know, to me, I've worked in organizations at AAA. We used a composite satisfaction score, and it was interesting, but it turned out not to be very actionable or useful. When it switched over to Net Promoter Score, it became far more actionable and useful. And so I think in that case, the tool does need to be used. And you know, the organizational culture of how they're going to chase a score, how they accept the score, what they do about it, is one of those things you actually have to take into consideration as well. I think the other part is, you know, to what degree is the enterprise measure as opposed to a departmental measure or a customer journey measure? You know, where do you get all those? And to me, if you understand the customer journey and you can roll up the critical metrics from a customer standpoint into the enterprise, you're going to be, you're going to be on point. If you don't do that, then you're likely to run into some friction along the way.
Yeah, great. And stick with you, Greg. How do CX leaders make that determination of which metric is going to be most beneficial to track in their unique business?
Well, I would hope they would staple themselves to a customer, walk through the whole journey, and based on that journey, come out and say, here's the metric that works for us, that represents customer success from a customer standpoint the best. Because if you do that, you're going to be a little bit more customer-centric. Unfortunately, most organizations chase the metric first. They say, well, here's the metric. And the executives, what drives me nuts about executives, like, could you give me just one metric? I want to make it really, really simple. Now, it won't be meaningful, but I really want to make it simple. The answer is, hey, come on, this isn't terribly complex. But let's just have the right set of measures that tell you what you need to know about things. So I think that this needs to be an outside-in exercise as opposed to an inside-out exercise. Done from the outside in, you're going to find what you need. From the inside out, you're going to find a bunch of arguments over potentially meaningless and not actionable metrics. So CX is always about the outside in. So why don't we start there?
Yeah, no, that's great, Greg. I love that, and the idea of letting the customer and their journey sort of help determine what metric is going to be best, rather than let's do NPS because everybody does NPS. That's great. Rachael, I'd love to hear your perspective here around choosing the right metric.
I agree with everything Greg said. It's absolutely dependent upon whether you're looking at an enterprise score or along that journey touch point. When I work with our teams, and people want to measure, we've got a new group or a new team, it always comes back to, well, what is your objective? And they do always want one score, right? It's like, okay, let's make sure that we're measuring the right thing. Are we measuring a team? Are we measuring a service? Are we measuring a product? The right metric has to align to the objective of that organization. So if that is a service organization, then what is the brand promise of that service organization? Do you deliver seamless experiences, something? Then let's use the metric that's for that. I do like to measure across the journey. And as Greg said, you have different touch points, different metrics, and frankly, different expected outcomes on each of those. And so I'm a fan of transactional NPS where it makes sense. Definitely overall satisfaction of that particular product or service. And again, depending on what the objective is, a different metric entirely may make sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tailoring the metrics to the purpose for that business.
Yeah. That's great, Rachael. And I know, Bob, you've had years of experience in a variety of different roles. I'm assuming, you used different metrics at different stops too. So would love your perspective here.
Well, I was chuckling a little bit when Greg talked about that executive, because I was that executive that would say to a consultant, I just need one metric. But a couple of thoughts come to mind based on what my colleagues just talked about. One is, like Rachael said, are we measuring transactions or relationships? And there's a distinction there. A transaction is, I got my oil changed and I get a survey, did I give them a 5 because they gave me great service? But what's the long-term relationship with the company that I'm getting my oil change at? That's a different situation. That's a different metric that we want to look at. And so, as Rachael said, across all of those touch points, what is that? What's my satisfaction? I always use the open table kind of view that says, when I book a reservation, it's for my anniversary and I want everything to be perfect. Well, each step along the way, from the time I book all the way till the time I get my food and pay my bill, that's a relationship I have with the restaurant. The individual things that are happening are the transactions. And then the second thought I had is that I wholeheartedly agree about this concept of I want one metric, meaning everybody's always asking for one metric. And there's so much talk about NPS as the metric, but I'm an advocate of a 4-part view of performance. employee, operational, customer, and financial. So let's look at metrics within each of those 4 boxes, if you will, and NPS would be one of them in customer. But let's look at the NPS score for an employee. Let's look at the NPS or other measurements of employee engagement. What are the operational activities going on within a company that would indicate to us retention of customers or would indicate to us growth or not lack of growth? And then finally, the financials is the company achieving its target. So if we look at it holistically across those 4 pillars, I think we get a better picture of a company's performance, an organization's performance, rather than that focus on just NPS. Very important, but not by itself.
Yeah, great point. Great point, Bob. And Rachael, I want to come to you on this next question. So, once a metric or a set of metrics has been chosen, how would a CX leader really rally employees around that metric? I know Greg had been talking about, at a previous stop, they use sort of a composite score. My previous experience, at one point we had used a customer experience index score, and we were challenged that the frontline staff really didn't understand that composite, and so when we changed to NPS, it was a little bit easier for folks to sort of understand that. So when it comes to sort of rallying the troops, what strategies have you found to be effective?
Thanks, Gabe. And this is actually something I'm very passionate about as well, because I don't think anybody should be measured on something they can't own. And so to me, it's all about ownership, and which means that score has to be something that they can rally around and that they can understand how they directly impact the score. For me, when people do Net Promoter Score, for example, and they want to make that the single score for the whole company, it doesn't work because there's so much that goes into it. So I'm in sales and I'm the face of the organization maybe, but there are so many other facets that are affecting the journey, right? So what I have done and what I've spent a lot of time doing is really working with the teams, onboarding and helping every employee understand how he or she impacts that score. So if it's a Net Promoter Score, for example, is what the company wants to rally around, then what I do is I take a top 2 box score and say, let's focus on that because it's tangible and it takes away the fear. So for example, if you were to give a team a score that they had to have an 80% NPS score, that was the deal. And maybe for an employee, for a sales rep with 50 accounts, they had to have an 80% NPS score. Well, one bad score can really bring that down. But if you say you have to have 75% top 2 box scores, well, that means 75% of your scores are a 9 or a 10. It gives you a little bit of leeway if somebody has a bad day and gives you a bad score. It avoids gaming. And it helps them to feel like it's a tangible score. So what I do to rally the troops is break it down, help them understand how they can directly influence and own that score, and then what's in it for them. How is this going to improve their job? How is this going to improve their future? And I find most of the time they get pretty excited because it's tangible and they can take it and run with it.
Yeah. Just listening, that's such a really great set of principles that you've outlined there. So very cool. Bob, anything that you want to share around this idea of rallying staff around a metric?
Yeah, it's great comments by Rachael. I'm reminded a number of years ago, and although I didn't work at this company, Continental Airlines was having a very, very difficult time with its performance, and they rallied everybody around an on-time performance metric. So all of the thousands of employees of Continental Airlines at the time were rallied around that one metric, and they made significant improvement. Now, you can argue that, you got some behaviors you might not have wanted. Let's get this door closed before the passenger has their last foot in the door because it's an on-time performance or we're all tied to it. And so at a recent company I was at, we tied everybody to an overall satisfaction. And the interesting unintended consequence is that we got a lot of our employees saying, well, I don't impact the customer satisfaction, so why are you tying it to me? And really we had to back up and educate and train employees about what it is that they do that does in fact impact the customer satisfaction. They might be a back office person, but everybody's part of the game here. So that was kind of an interesting result of what we did when we tried to rally around one metric.
Yeah, that's interesting. So making that connection, even if you're somebody who's, in a payroll function or something like that, you're taking actions that are going to trickle down to the customer.
Yep.
Very cool. Yeah, Greg, I want to bring you in here too. Any thoughts around rallying employees?
Yeah, I think that there's two things. First of all, they need to understand the journey the customer goes through, and so they can understand their touch point. But understanding what happens before and after is really critical because it impacts the sentiment and the emotions that customers have, that they come into the touch point with, and where they take the emotions they leave. So I think, first of all, when they understand that and can see it, then they actually have a total clear view. I think the second part is it's got to be transparency between their actions and something that's that impacting the customer, no matter who they are. And we found at Copart when we implemented Net Promoter Score at the branch level, we took the offices that were the top performing in terms of NPS. We profiled just the managerial practices they were using. We didn't dictate what they were. We just profiled, like, here are the tallest of the 150 branch offices. We identified 10 great practices they were using. And that became the playbook for every other office. No one could say it can't be done. It didn't come from another company. For God's sake, they could call on the phone their buddies over in the other office and find out. So that connection was right there, and so they could see what it was. And Net Promoter Score went up by 40 points over the next few months after that was implemented. So it's transparency.
Yeah, great point. And I want to stick with you, Greg, on this question of around ROI. This is top of mind for every CX practitioner's ROI, especially in times of economic uncertainty, just critical that to prove the ROI of CX. So for folks who are listening right now, who really feel particularly challenged by this, perhaps they have some technology or some organizational barriers in place that make this particularly difficult. What's some advice that you might share with that CX practitioner?
Yeah, so it leverages something Bob said earlier, which is, as he talked about the balanced scorecard things, you've got to connect the dots between the customer experience and operational metrics, because that's what a lot of senior leaders focus on, financial metrics, which is the language of the C-suite, and the employee experience. And if you can do that, then you're going to get a lot more people on board. But unfortunately, just like CX is seen in the same way as brand in many cases, which is it's valuable, but we don't know how to measure it. Okay, we know how to measure leads, but we don't know how to measure the brands. Well, the fact is we've got case study after case study where you can measure the impact of customer experience improvements, activities, and programs on every operational metric, on employee metrics, and on financial metrics. What I'd say is, to CX professionals out there is, hey, look, let's be bold and take a risk, because not doing this is a risk that CX will become irrelevant at your company. We should go for great here, okay? And because we can. I haven't seen any CX program that doesn't have a 3-digit ROI, because it has that much power, okay? But now no CFO believes it's 100% or more, okay? And I showed one, it's like, this is 1,000% ROI on it. And they go, I don't believe you. It's like, did you believe it's 100%? They go, sure. And it's like, well, then approve the stinking project. Come on. If you believe it's 100%, you don't have to believe it's 1,000%, although it was 1,000%. So I think you have to be bold and you have to commit to doing it, okay? You can't shy away from committing to those results and committing to the measurement and the management of it. Without that, who's going to give you money, attention, and C-suite commitment if you're not willing to measure and manage the program? They shouldn't give you that if you're not willing to measure it. So let's be bold and confident.
Yeah, great message for CX Day. Be bold. I love it. Bob, you want to jump in here? ROI of CX. What's some advice for you'd give for some folks who may feel challenged with this?
Well, I probably will say a little something too controversial, but quit playing the victim is what I often tell customer experience leaders. You're walking into a boardroom, you're asking for a lot of money to fund your experience, and sometimes we walk in there and we say, well, you have to do it. It's customer experience. But you have a CFO that's sitting there looking at all of the investments across the enterprise, and she's saying to herself, I can get an investment over here for $5 million that returns 3 digits like Greg talked about if I build this new plant, and this person's coming in and saying, on a wing and a prayer, let's invest in customer experience. And so it really is about, I love what Greg just said, is be bold. Let's not play the victim. Go in and talk to a CFO like you're trying to get that investment in a plant or a piece of equipment or software application. And then we'll talk the same language. And let's meet the CFO and the CEO where their thought process is in terms of an investment. The ROI is a hot topic right now within CX. There's a great study out by Waterstone Consulting that looked at 11-year stock performance, and CX leaders outperformed the S&P 183% to 130% or something. So what Greg talked about is 3 digits. Yeah, and they outperformed laggards by 3 times their performance. So it's there, the data's there to support it, and we can be successful in proving the need to invest in CX in an organization without doing it on a wing and a prayer.
Yeah, great thoughts, Bob. Rachel, would love to hear from you here too.
Thanks, Gabe, and Greg, Bob, you guys, I just love being on this panel with you. Great insights, and I can't wait to see the new Waterstone report. And it's absolutely true. And I think, I had a financial background before I ever got engulfed in customer experience. And then, of course, I couldn't stop. But I always want to have a strong ROI. 10x ROI is not unheard of, right? So understanding that this is a business decision. This is not a fluffy, nice to have, soft thing. This is real, tangible business dollars. And I love that. Be bold. It's CX Day. Be bold. Be bold with your teams. Be bold with your executives. This is not a feel-good activity. It really is. We love people. We want to provide the best experiences. But make no mistake, this is a business decision, and it needs to have business numbers behind it. And we've got them. That's what's so exciting, is that when you take the time and you look at the data and you follow the trends, we've got the data. So you don't have to be afraid to say, well, we can't really measure it. You can measure it. You can, because as they referenced earlier, both Bob and Greg, on that balanced scorecard, you've got the 4 areas. You've got, we love the X and O, right? I still think of X and kisses, I'm sorry, but experience and operational data. You've got the financial data and the employee feedback. All of these projects, CX projects in any of these areas, are going to improve efficiencies. They're going to improve effectiveness. They're going to change your metrics on your passives to your promoters. You can measure your year-over-year financials of your promoters versus your passives and your detractors. And you can see the impact of the money you're leaving on the table when you do those calculations. So calculating your NPS per account, and calculating the amount of savings and improvement operational efficiencies, you can measure that. Tie it back to an employee average salary for, if you save 60 man hours, what does that equal? Add those up and you've got a really solid ROI that's always resulting in a better experience for your customers and, oh, by the way, for your employees too. So it's a win-win. I love it. Be bold. Be bold.
Yeah.
Orange and purple.
I think that's a great message to end on. And I always loved CX Day. Even prior to joining CXPA, I just felt like it was such a shot in the arm to hear from other CX practitioners who were sort of in the trenches. So just want to thank you, Rachel, Bob, Greg, for your great insights. Loving these takeaways on CX Day. So Derek, I'm going to turn it over to you to close us out today.
Great. Thank you so much, Gabe. And first off, before we officially close out, I would like to give a big virtual round of applause to all of our panelists today for sharing all of their thought leadership. This was even a lot of fun to listen to for me, who doesn't even have a whole lot of CX experience. So again, a huge thank you for participating today. And for all of you that are listening, I wish you all a very happy CX Day. And I hope that you've taken something away from our panelists today that you can implement into your own CX program to end the year strong and to kick off 2020 with a bang. So thanks again, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your CX Day. Bye now.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.